Now my story's not going to make it.
And we are live.
All right. And the punchline is they tell me, the guy says, yeah, just they want you to do a clean install on a new volume. And I lost my ever loving mind because I did that back in May. Right. So anyway, I come back and I tell him everything that I've done. I make him read the notes. I'm badgering this guy because he clearly doesn't know anything about my case. And he says, oh, yeah, they only got one of the 3 capture data files.
Wow.
Send them to her. Send them all to her. Uploaded them all.
Has it been 5 months? How many months have you been working?
5 months. Yeah, it was May.
That's frustrating.
Yeah, I'm beside myself. But Sandy, what an interesting thing in the middle of this was when he said, okay, they want you to do this, make a separate volume. What's wrong?
You paused for, I don't know if other people noticed that, but it's in the video.
Jill says, is anyone talking?
Yes, we are talking, Jill.
Is anyone else having trouble hearing us? Thank you for the roll call, Mike. All right.
Jill doesn't appear to be in the live show listen channel.
Oh, somebody text her that. Anyway, the punchline of the story is when the guy was telling me that I needed to make a new volume, he said, and they said, if not, we'll have you send it in for hardware repair. And I did not go forward with that option because you know what they would do. You know that they would find nothing wrong and they would return it to me blank and I would have to install again. So anyway, we'll see if they figure anything out this time. They're going to call me on Monday.
No, not high hopes. No. All right. Well, we got a lot to do here.
We do.
Got a big show.
So roll call. We have Brett and Kevin and Frank and Mike and Jill and Mr. Ed, Grandpa Ed, and John and Rose and Sandy and Steve. Anybody in the a new one, a Power Rangers.
Yeah, that brings back some memories.
Yes, I'm holding my breath, Sandy. Absolutely.
I don't think I see anyone else in the sidebar.
Alrighty.
But they'll pipe up if we missed them.
Jill, can you hear us now? She says I couldn't hear anything at all. There she goes. Good. All right.
Okay.
To start right up. Here we go. Hi, this is Allison Sheridan of the NosillaCast podcast, hosted at podfeet.com, a technology geek podcast with an ever so slight Apple bias. Today is Sunday, October 22nd, 2023, and this is show number 963. I know that wasn't a good ending, but that's where it's going to end.
Okay. That seemed to start a little hot and then taper down. How does the audio level look on your recording? It looks pretty level from what I can see.
Yeah. I mean,
all right. It's probably fine.
I go back and listen to it. Let me play it back for me. Hi, this is Allison Sheridan of the NosillaCast podcast. Sounds perfect.
Okay. Sound okay in the chat room, I assume?
All right.
Thank you, John.
Okay, keeping going. Here we go. If you've ever needed to get feedback from a group of people, using the free Google Forms is a great way to do it. You can create surveys, get feedback on a class you've taught, help organize a family reunion, or even create quizzes. I've used it to organize the party we used to throw for the Nosilla Castaways at Macworld. And during the pandemic, we created a form for what food our friends wanted delivered on Thanksgiving. And I once did a survey to determine the first 5 apps Mac users install on a new Mac. Spoiler, 1Password was number 1 by a long shot. Anyway, I mentioned all of this because last week, Screencast Online has published my video tutorial on how to use all of the features of Google Forms. You can sign up for the... Go sign up. Go sign up for the free trial and watch it at screencastonline.com. Okie dokie. How's the sound, Steve? We okay?
Yeah, I think so.
Good. I'm trying to go fast because
Yep.
we have something from Steve,
Oh, you do.
and we want to make sure we have enough time for it. All right. Another fun place to have put it would have been right after this Find My story. Copy link. All right. That one. Right before Steve and I left to drive to Utah, Steve realized that he couldn't find his iPhone. Now, this happens pretty often, but this time, the car was packed, the windshield was washed, the goodbyes were said to the animals, we were ready to go. Now, as one does, Steve used the side button on his Apple Watch and he tapped the icon to ping his iPhone. But we didn't hear the happy chime from his phone. Now, this feature rarely fails us, and it was even more surprising because he has a brand spanking new iPhone 15 Pro and the Apple Watch Series 9. This year's newly released iPhones and Apple Watches sport the second generation ultra wideband or UWB chip. This new chip is supposed to pinpoint the location even better than before. Instead of the watch just being able to ping the phone, the Apple Watch now shows you an approximate distance as you look for it. It's just like that kids game where you're trying to find a hidden item and everyone's yelling, warmer, colder, warmer, colder. Anyway, since Steve couldn't hear his iPhone responding, he started wandering around the house while watching the distance change on his watch. Concurrently, I used the tried and true method employed by spouses everywhere. I looked in all of the weird places where I'd found Steve's phone before. After a few frustrating and unsuccessful minutes, Steve and my searches converged near the downstairs powder room. Steve said that the lowest distance he had been able to find was 9 feet, and it was while he was standing in the powder room. But whenever he went out of the powder room, the number went up. I suddenly knew where the phone was. Like Khan in the second Star Trek movie, we had been thinking in 2 dimensions. I decided to think out of the plane, and I went directly upstairs from where Steve was standing. Sure enough, his phone was in our closet directly above the powder room. Now, my goal in telling you this story isn't just to signal that I'm a Star Trek fan, but to hopefully put this little anecdote in the back of your brain, just in case you're ever searching for your phone with your watch. Think inside the box, but remember the box is 3-dimensional.
Nice reference.
Oh, I saw this at Mac Geek Edgar. Schedule a play date. Yeah. Oh, hang on. Let me look at this picture he just sent. PM set glog wake request to the command point. Give me a very long list. How do I figure out what application is causing the specific issue? Yeah, that's actually interesting. I do know that Apple said that my Mac wakes up approximately once a minute.
Wow.
So you would think they would know what was waking it up, wouldn't you?
Needs a CPAP machine.
Yeah, exactly. All right, we're going to do another tiny tip. Or actually, this ended up with 2 tiny tips one after another. Oh, well. I'm excited about this one. Anybody here like Stage Manager? I love Stage Manager, and I have a Stage Manager tiny tip. Where is it? There it is. Okay, Mike is the fan. Oh, Sandy, you haven't used it. Interesting. All right, well, I'm going to give you a reason to like it more. Oh, Brett, when did you sneak in? Were you here? Oh, wait, Seamus. Did I say hi to Seamus? Don't remember. Okay, well, I'm saying hi twice. All right, here we go. Oh, tiny tip music. There it is. Last December, my buddy Ron and I had a chat for the NosillaCast on why we both love Stage Manager on the Mac. In the last 10 months, my love for Stage Manager has not dwindled a bit. Even with my devotion, there was one thing that still felt really clumsy. Let's say I'm writing an email to someone and I want to add an attachment. With Mail in the foreground of Stage Manager, I can get to the Finder in 2 different ways. I can Command Tab to it, or I can click on a Finder window that I see in the stacks on the left. If there's a stack with just a Finder window open, that window will pop into visibility and the Mail window will go into a stack. While I can drag the item from the Finder, now I don't have the Mail app visible to drag it into. In order to get both apps visible at the same time, I have to have one app visible and then click and drag the second one on screen. That's dandy, again, if the Finder window is the only thing in that stack or if it's on the top thing in a stack. But sometimes the Finder window is in a stack with another app. So I have to drag the first app into visibility, then drag the Finder into visibility, and finally hide that second app again. This is a glorious example of faffing about. Now, at this point, if you're not already a fan of Stage Manager, I may have convinced you to never try it, but please bear with me on a tiny tip that solves this problem. Now, you may also remember that I said I use Yoink now, and it does help solve that problem, but you're still switching back and forth between the apps, and it's still kind of faffing about, in my opinion. I was listening to the HomeKit Insider podcast from the fine folks at Apple Insider, hosted by Andrew O'Hara and Stephen Robles. It's a great show. Anyway, I heard one of the gentlemen briefly mention a better way of moving windows around when using Stage Manager. He said that you can hold down Shift Command while clicking on an app in the stack, and that app will immediately join the current main window. It is awesome. No more dragging in and out and command tabbing around. I can't believe how much more efficient Stage Manager is with this tiny trick. Now, I've been using the drag and drop problem to illustrate the value of this Shift Command click trick for Stage Manager, but remember, there's a lot of times you just want to see two apps at the same time. It rocks for that too. Sometimes you have more than one application open in a stack. Let's use our Mail example, and you need a Finder window, but it's in a stack with Safari, and you can see in the stack it's actually behind Safari. If you can get your cursor onto the edge of that hidden Finder window when you hit Shift Command, then just that Finder window will come forward, not Safari. Sometimes it's a little tricky to get just that window, but most of the time I'm pretty successful with it. Now, in September of this year, I explained how I use Yoink with Stage Manager. It solves the drag and drop problem, and I'm still a fan, but it doesn't solve the problem of bringing up a stacked application window, and it requires buying and installing a $9 app. I'm gleefully happy about Shift Command Click in a stack to make my Stage Manager. Take that again. I'm gleefully happy about Shift Command Click in a stack to make my Stage Manager experience even happier. Okay, so I talked about Yoink, and I shouldn't have because it was already in there to be later. Let me see, where did I talk about it? Then drag the Finder into visibility and finally hide that second. You glad you like it, Mike? This is a glorious example of faffing about. Now, at this point, if you're not already a fan of Stage Manager, I may have convinced you to never try it, but please bear with me on a tiny tip that solves this problem. Now, you may also. There's one spot. Split that there. And it's still kind of faffing about, in my opinion. I was listening to the. I can hear you clicking and dragging around, Steve.
Is that a problem?
Typing or something.
I can mute.
Not yet. Okay. Now, should I do,
That was not me, Mike.
Trying to decide whether to do this tiny tip about dressing up Apple screenshots.
You don't like doing them back to back, or you just don't want to?
Yeah, I don't like them back to back.
Well, so, can you save it? Do you have enough to save it for next week?
I'll find out. Maybe not. Let's see, where am I? 5-4 here. Tiny tip. Apple Watch. Gotta remember to remove it. Oh, save and do a chapter mark. Yeah, I may come back and pick it up. We'll see. Okay. So I got to remember to change the. Yeah. Oh, this is good. We'll go straight into Steve now. That's okay, right, Steve?
Sure.
Oh, did you introduce yourself in it?
I don't think I did. Nope, I did not.
Right. Oh, I wanted to check one thing. Box is three-dimensional. That's what I was worried about. A little bit more gap there. Searching for your phone with your watch. Think inside the box, but remember the box is three-dimensional. Yeah, that's better. All right. Well, next up, we've got Steve, or as he likes to call himself, Steve the husband, on the show here to talk about some of the things he did from a technology perspective that are pretty cool while we were viewing the eclipse this last weekend in Utah. So let's listen to Steve. How's that? All
Fine.
right. Your enthusiasm in Utah. So let's listen to Steve. Too long. Utah. So let's listen to Steve.
In August, I gave you my review of the Insta360 X3 Action Cam. My ending line of the review was, the camera has so many features I haven't discovered, let alone use them all yet, so I have a lot of fun ahead of me finding out what this action camera can really do. I've continued discovery of features, and one of my favorites is the X3's ability to capture star trails in the night sky as they appear, at least from our view in the northern hemisphere, to rotate counterclockwise around the North Star. In the southern hemisphere, the effect is opposite, where they appear to rotate in the clockwise direction, but there is no prominent southern pole star around which they rotate. Living in the depths of Los Angeles County, we're lucky if we see a few dozen stars due to light pollution, but we took some recent trips to more remote locations where I could give it a try. Our latest trip was to Utah with the goal of seeing the annular eclipse that occurred on October 14th. Our first stop was to visit our friends Dean and Suzanne, who live in Springdale, Utah, nestled next to Zion National Park. Yeah, it's a difficult assignment, but someone has to do it. Coincidentally, Springdale recently earned an international dark sky certification because of the town's successful efforts to eliminate light pollution, so it was an ideal place to try to capture star trails. I had to study up on how to capture star trails with my X3 camera, and then I did my first test while we were up in Mammoth a month or so ago. It worked pretty well, but a nearby cabin light was going on and off during the night, so it wasn't ideal. Now that I had a successful test case, I made some notes for myself so I could reproduce the effect for the trip to Utah. I'm going to list the steps and settings to capture the star trails that I used with my Insta X3 camera. They aren't meant to be a tutorial, but if you have an Insta360 X3, they'll give you a good starting point for your own experiments. Okay, to capture the star trails, first connect the Insta360 iPhone app to the X3 camera. Then select the camera icon at the bottom of the screen, select the Star Lapse option at the bottom of the screen, and then select Manual or M mode. Now we set the shutter speed to 30 seconds, the ISO to 1000, and the white balance to 5500K. Then we connect the X3 to a power bank so that we can shoot all night without running out of battery. But before we begin shooting, tightly wrap the camera, except the lenses, of course, with foil to prevent bleed through of the display light and other lights into the lens. Be sure the camera is in the 360 mode and click the shutter button to begin taking an overnight series of Starlapse photos. After you're done shooting Starlapse in the morning, click on Stories, slide down to Starlapse, and select the video just captured to create the Starlapse video. Now, the camera will take some time to create this effect. Optionally, you can do further edits by adding music or titles or other effects that the X3 offers, if desired. Finally, we'll export using the custom settings Color Plus, Remove Grain, Highest Resolution, and Highest Bitrate settings. We'll export that video using Reframe to get the perspective you want, and then be sure to update the keyframe to save that perspective before you export. And that does it. If you're interested in seeing the result, I've included in my blog post the Starlapse video from Springdale with a bit of background music added for effect. For those who watch the entire video and are very observant, there's an artifact near the end of the video where a passing car momentarily lights up an object in the foreground. That, of course, was unintentional. Leave a comment in the blog post if you can identify what that object is. You also might notice a few streaks that appear in directions different from the star trails. The streaks that appear dotted or dashed are passing aircraft, but a few of the streaks are more continuous and are possibly overhead satellites, particularly if they appear near the beginning, just after sunset, or end, just before sunrise, of the video. From Dean and Suzanne's, we traveled to Torrey, a small town in southern Utah. We chose Torrey since it was in the path where the annular eclipse would be fully formed. From this location, we were able to view the sun for a little over 4 minutes while the moon was perfectly centered over it. Unlike a total solar eclipse where the moon fully covers the sun, leaving just the glowing corona surrounding the moon, during an annular eclipse, the moon is farther from the Earth and thus appears smaller than the sun. As a result, the moon doesn't completely cover the sun, but instead creates the classic ring of fire spectacle. You can read about our exploits in filming a total solar eclipse from our trip to Vicuña, Chile in 2019, and there's a link in the blog post to see that. Since the X3 does not support magnification well, it's really designed for wide angle shots, I took video of the annular eclipse using a 4K camcorder, the Panasonic HC WXF991, with 20:1 magnification and a solar filter over the lens. Now, as a reminder, don't ever point your camera directly at the sun for long periods without a solar filter, since it can damage the camera's sensor, just like it can damage your eyes. You can go to the blog post to see the time-lapse video I created of the annular eclipse as we viewed it from Torrey, Utah. Now, if you watch the video, you might notice a couple small dark spots in the sun in the lower left quadrant. These are not dust particles on the camera lens, but sunspots on the sun's surface, caused by active regions where the sun's temperature and light is reduced. They often appear in pairs, as we see in the video. Now for the bad news about my filming of the eclipse. The main draw for viewing this eclipse is the 4+ minutes where the moon was perfectly centered over the sun. During this time, the sun's outer ring appears as a brightly glowing annulus against a somewhat darkened sky. As I mentioned before, we traveled all this way to view that ring, and the weather was clear, so we got a gorgeous view of the ring of fire. As you might imagine, I was really hoping to capture that ring of fire with my camcorder. Now, I was successful in collecting all of the phases of the eclipse from beginning to end on video. But if you look closely, you might have noticed that I did not capture the moon perfectly centered on the sun in the video. When I got back home to download and start processing the video, I discovered, much to my dismay, that I had accidentally turned off the camcorder just before the eclipse entered this crucial phase and turned it on as the ring phase ended. I think this happened because I was already recording but thought the camera was off, so I thought I was turning on the recording. Imagine my disappointment after all of my preparation and travel, finding out I did not capture the main event. Let this be a teaching moment to anyone else. Confirm your video camera is in record mode when you really want to record something. All was not lost, though, since I was able to make lemonade out of lemons by creating the time-lapse video of the eclipse phases. In the blog post, I leave you with a photo of a nearly full annulus, which is the closest I came to capturing the ring of fire just before I turned off the video camera. As Maxwell Smart used to say, missed it by that much.
That was
By
perfect.
that
Steve.
much. Yeah, I kicked myself for a day or two after I discovered that.
I'm still surprised at how well you took that, because I mean, you did so much work and carried so much equipment with you to try to do this, and then to make that kind of mistake. Oh,
Well,
all right.
so maybe this is good training for the total eclipse in April next year.
Yeah, would you rather do it on the annular or the full?
So I was thinking about that. We've seen 3 total eclipses and no annular eclipses. This is the first and probably only one we'll see, because the next one isn't until the 2030s. And maybe we'll see it, maybe we won't. But anyway, I'm okay with it. Worst things can happen.
Exactly. All right, let me say a little bit, and then I'll move on to the next one. I think I am going to do the second tiny tip. I did some math, and if I save the Eufy story, then I definitely need to do the other tiny tip. So here goes.
Okay. Turned off the video camera. As Maxwell Smart used to say, missed it by that much.
Okay, Steve, that is exactly the perfect description of this. Now, the good thing is I have never thought I was taking video when I was actually had just turned off the camera, and I know none of you have ever done it either, but I was amazed at how well Steve took this because he did so much work to carry all the equipment, get it all ready, and get it set up and everything, and then to have missed just the some might call it the most important part, because we could have seen a partial annular eclipse from our house. We went, drove 8 hours and then another 3.5 hours to get there just to see the full no, it's just called an annular eclipse. Anyway, I still think his videos came out really cool, and the time lapse star trails are fantastic. All right, wait.
Well,
Okay,
thank
so
you.
now we're gonna do the screenshots. Oh, come on.
Screenshot. Oh, okay.
Tiny tip screenshots. I moved it.
Got it.
Make it better. Tiny tip, tiny bubbles. All right, we got to keep moving here. Fun. Thank you, Kevin. And I'm gonna go find the Apple Watch one. Oh, I got to do the music again. Tiny tip again. Oh. Okay. Yes, that music means we have yet another tiny tip. I recently told you about how I made pretty screenshots of my Apple Watch, including nice watch frames and pretty watch bands. I explained how, in order to accomplish this feat, I downloaded the free app WatchShot. It's an easy to use app and produces beautiful Apple Watch screenshots, but you do have to spend a little bit of time choosing which watch frame you want and which band you want on the screenshot. If you're looking for a more quick and dirty method that still clearly shows that your screenshot is from an Apple Watch, there's an easier way. Stephen Ramirez, also known as at SR in our Podfeet Slack, which you should all join at podfeet.com/Slack. Anyway, Stephen posted a very clever idea of how to get a screenshot of the Apple Watch with a kind of cartoon watch frame and no band using only native Apple tools. Stephen explained that if you have an Apple Watch Series 6 or newer paired to your iPhone, you can enable screen mirroring of the watch onto your iPhone screen. Once he had screen mirroring enabled, he simply took a screenshot of the phone and cropped it to square to just show the Apple Watch. Now, I remember when screen mirroring of the Apple Watch was enabled, but I had entirely forgotten all about it. Stephen even included a link to the Apple support article that explains how to set up Apple Watch mirroring. It's a really simple process. You open settings on the iPhone and navigate to accessibility. Under physical and motor controls, you'll see Apple Watch screen mirroring. When you select it, you'll see a simple toggle to enable screen mirroring of the Apple Watch on the iPhone. As soon as you flip the toggle on, you'll see a card slide up from the bottom of the iPhone screen that says the name of your Apple Watch and shows the Apple Watch screen with a gray cartoon watch frame. It's not fancy like the ones from WatchShot, but it does the job effectively of illustrating that this little rectangular screenshot is actually an Apple Watch screenshot. Now what you do, you've got this Apple Watch up on screen with its little cartoon. You take a screenshot of the iPhone by pressing the up, volume, and power buttons at the same time. You have to have that feature enabled also on the iPhone. Anyway, this launches markup with the screenshot you just took, and from there you can crop in on the little image of the Apple Watch with its cartoon frame. Save it to photos or files or airdrop it to your Mac. That's it. No third-party app required. When I tested Steven's cool trick, I played around a little bit with Apple Watch mirroring to iPhone. Guess what else you can do? You can actually interact with the Apple Watch using the mirrored display on the iPhone. You can swipe up and down, left and right, and select things on the watch screen using the iPhone. Not only that, you can actually tap the side button and the digital crown to do things. It's really kind of fun. But what problem does it actually solve to be able to do this? I can think of a couple of ways it could be useful. I could see it as a nifty way to allow you to record a video on the iPhone to teach people some Apple Watch tricks. If you connected your iPhone via cable to your Mac, you could share its screen on applications like Zoom, so you could do live demos to family, friends, or user groups. Now, it may work to connect your iPhone to Zoom and other applications without a cable, but I didn't actually test that because I'm figuring that since the watch is mirroring to the phone, you might not be able to mirror from the phone to the computer without a cable. So I didn't actually test that. Anyway, I made a little video by calling myself on Zoom, and I shared my iPhone to the call. And then I recorded the call while screen mirroring the Apple Watch to it. I cropped it down, and it actually looks pretty cute. You can look for it in the show notes. Now, if all this sounds like something you'd like to do more often than once in a blue moon, like maybe you teach people all the time and you like to be able to do this, you might want a way to enable screen mirroring even more quickly. iOS has something called the accessibility shortcut, which allows you to quickly launch accessibility tools with a triple click of the side button on the phone. You can add items to that triple click of the side button by going into Settings, Accessibility, and down at the bottom under General, you'll see Accessibility Shortcut. When selected, you'll see a giant list of accessibility options, and if you tap Apple Watch Mirroring, it'll be added to the triple click shortcut. If you only have one accessibility option selected, then triple clicking the side button will instantly launch screen mirroring of the Apple Watch. I should say if that's the only thing you have added. If you have more than one option added to the accessibility shortcut, if you add more than one option to the accessibility shortcut, then triple clicking the side button will show you the list of options you've added, and you simply tap to enable whichever one you want. Now, this is definitely one of those things where trying to explain it is much clumsier than just doing it yourself. The only sad thing about all of this is that halfway through writing up this article about it, screen mirroring of the Apple Watch to my iPhone stopped working. It pops up just fine and says the name of my watch, but the watch representation on the iPhone stays black, spins for a while, and then says Apple Watch disconnected. I followed Apple's advice and rebooted both devices. I toggled airplane mode on and off, and I made sure neither device was set to do not disturb, but none of that brought screen mirroring back to life. I think I figured out what was wrong. So if this does happen to you, listen up. The newer watches have always on capability, but when you're not actively fussing with the watch, the screen goes kind of dim. I found that if I made a point of fiddling with my watch face when I was trying to start up screen mirroring, it would always work. So that's a bonus tiny tips thrown in there for free. So thanks, Stephen, so much for reminding us about screen mirroring and giving us a much easier way to create illustrative screenshots of the Apple Watch.
Yeah, a couple of people were saying they were trying it and it wasn't working, but I wonder if that second little tip, they could try that and see if it worked now.
Yeah. Oh, Apple Watch SE. That's interesting. Is that before the Apple Watch Series 6?
No. After, apparently.
Interesting. So always on. Okay, so do try the like while you're doing it, just play with the watch. Just scroll around and tapping it.
Yeah, I might confirm that.
Okay, so it does work if you play with it. Okay, good. Your lawn watch is down to 2%. So Sandy, have you tried playing with it? See if you play with the watch, does it fix it?
Are you up on the latest watch and phone OSs, Sandy?
Would, of course.
I think she would be.
She stays patched, so she stays secure, right?
You got it.
Let me do some quick spam in here. Salmon sounds like salmon. Just restart your watch. It doesn't connect to the phone. Do you get the thing come up from the bottom and it says the name of your watch but it's just a black face, or do you get nothing at all? Just a black face, yeah. And have you played with the watch? Like literally, like just start tapping stuff while it's trying to do it? It's interesting if that doesn't always work. All right. Well, I've got to keep rolling here. Here we go. So you know who's awesome? Tom Maddock. Not only does he do occasional reviews for the podcast, and not only is he a 6-year patron of the podcast, but he just doubled his pledge on Patreon. Told you he's awesome. If you'd like to be awesome like Tom, head over to podfeet.com/Patreon and pledge your support to the shows we do here at the Podfeet Podcasts. All right. You want some fish after? Did I say something about fish?
Salmon.
Oh.
Salmon chanted evening.
Salmon chanted evening. That's something our friend Ron said once, swimming in Hawaii.
In Hawaii. We were out in the ocean, all three of us. And
there might have been rum involved. I don't know. Salmon chanted evening.
Yeah.
Okay. Now for a long one. Won't Tom mind if I double his Patreon contribution?
You might. Since he just doubled it.
But you'd be awesome. I wouldn't mind. All right. I am going to save, and I've got a lot to read here now. This is going to be long. This is... Yeah. All right. I've talked a lot about the process of nuking and paving my Macs over the years, and I just finished the process a couple of weeks ago. I've mentioned that I have a giant mind map that I follow to install all of my apps and to configure all of them. I was wondering, would you like me to go maybe talk through every single app I install and how I configure them in the pave half of the nuke and pave? It's only like 15 pages long in outline form. Yeah, I didn't think so. But I do a lot of little tweaks to macOS and Apple's built-in apps to make it just the way I like it after a nuke, and I thought that might actually be of interest to many of you. So we're going to go through a bunch of different things. The first thing is going to be Finder. There are quite a few settings I change in the Finder that I find makes my computing life easier. With the standard Finder window, there are 3 bars that are really useful to have visible at all times. The toolbar across the top is on by default, which gives you the access to a number of buttons to control things like changing from icon to list or column view, grouping of files, sharing, and more. But 2 other bars are off by default, and I feel paralyzed without them. Under the View menu in Finder, you can turn on the Path bar and the Status bar. The Path bar shows at the bottom of Finder windows, and it shows you the full path graphically back to the root folder. For example, I have a folder of images I was working on for this article, and I could see with one of them selected that the folder it's in is called Paving. That's inside this week's NosillaCast folder, which is inside NosillaCast Weekly Files, which is inside a NosillaCast folder, which is inside of a folder called Podfeet, which lives in Documents, which is inside of iCloud Drive. And maybe you don't always need to pay attention to the full path like that, but if you do have the path bar showing, you can do magical things like jump to a much higher directory in the path simply by clicking on the icon in the path bar, or you can even drag files up the path using the path bar. We learned that little trick from Helma from the Netherlands a little while ago. The even more critical bar to keep showing in Finder windows at all times is the status bar. This sits below the path bar, and it tells you how many files are in the currently selected folder, as well as how much space is available on your disk. I might need more water, Steve.
All right. I'll be right there.
Thank you. Save. Where did I start creaking out? How much space is available on your disk? Thank you, dear. Just straight up water. Thank you. On your disk. If the selected folder is in iCloud Drive, you'll actually see how much space you have left in the cloud. I use the status bar really often when I'm comparing 2 folders that are supposed to have the same contents. Rather than counting the files, I can quickly tell at a glance looking at the status bar because it tells me the number of files. One of the silliest user interface design decisions Apple has made in the past few years has been to have certain features only visible when you hover over something. The worst example of this is how if you hover over the title of a Finder window, you'll see the folder icon appear. But if you move away, it disappears again. Who would want this? Anyway, that window title icon is super useful. If you're in a Save As dialog box in any application and you have the folder into which you want to save open, I knew I would stumble on that phrase. It's a clumsy sentence. Somebody should have told me to rewrite it. If you're in a Save, yeah, gin and tonic probably would help. Actually, I find rye whiskey helps. If you're in a Save As dialog box in any application, but you also have the folder into which say it again. If you're in a Save As dialog box in any application and you have the folder into which you want to save open in Finder at the same time, you can drag that little folder icon into the Save As dialog box and it will change where you save to that open folder. I use this all day long. One of the first things I do when I set up a new Mac or pave an existing one is to tell the system to stop hiding that icon from me. I have trouble remembering what it's called, so it's super hard to search for where to turn that darn hiding off. But I'm documenting it now, so I'll be able to go back and look it up. It's in System Settings, Accessibility, Display, Show Window Title Icons. If you toggle that on, then your precious folder icons will always be visible. I have no more idea why this is hidden inside accessibility than I understand why Apple chose to hide the icon from us in the first place. Now, still in the Finder settings here, I don't favor icon view when perusing a folder, but it's the only way to view your desktop. For some reason, Apple seems to think that most of us are comfortable living in anarchy with our files and folders just sprinkled haphazardly around on our desktops. Oh, I'm going to start that again. Now, still in the I don't favor icon view when perusing a folder, but it's the only way to view your desktop, which is curious now that you think about it. Anyway, for some reason, Apple seems to think that most of us are comfortable living in anarchy with our files and folders just sprinkled haphazardly around on our desktops. I'm sure you don't like it that way any more than I do. Up in the Finder View menu, look for Sort By, and you'll see several options. One is to snap to grid, which is a good first step because at least when you drag things around, they'll stay in neat little columns and rows. But I go a step further and I sort by name. This option cause okay, why am I stuttering? But I go a step further and I sort by name. This option causes Snap to Grid to be enabled and alphabetizes your desktop files as nature intended. And as a bonus prize, it puts your drives up at the top. Oh, did you say you can't see your drives and external disks? Take a quick trip to Finder Settings and choose which items you'd like visible: hard disks, external disks, CDs, DVDs, and iPods and connected servers. I know, iPods and connected media, right? Optical media. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Even hard disks are an antiquated term for internal disks these days, but it's sitting up there in that menu. I think it's curious that this setting isn't in the View menu, but instead it's within Finder Settings. So I'm always bouncing back and forth between those two trying to find it. But I guess we should be happy that they didn't hide it in accessibility, right? Well, while you're in the Finder Settings menu, did you know you can change the location of where new Finder windows open? I find no value in the Recents folder, which is selected by default. So I always change this to my Home folder. Now, let's switch gears and change over to talking about iCloud Drive. Why did is that yeah, that's the top level. Yeah. Okay. I'm a big fan of syncing desktop and documents through iCloud Drive. I get why you might not want to do that. Okay. I'm a big fan of syncing desktop and documents through iCloud Drive. I get that there's a lot of reasons why you might not want to do that, but I personally like having all of my documents available on both of my Macs and on my iPad and on my iPhone, all within the Files app. I purposely bought my MacBook Pro with a 4 terabyte drive so that I would never have to make compromises on what I could keep locally. This giant drive allows me to keep my 100,000 plus photos in full resolution. Having them locally means I can back them up locally and not entirely depend on Apple to protect my precious photos. When you enable syncing via iCloud Drive for desktop and documents, it'll default to optimize storage. This means that it will move files into the cloud that you haven't used recently if it needs to save storage for you. In my experience, it does that even if it's not running out of space, because with 4 terabytes, I'm not running out of space. So, just like with my photos, I would like all of my documents to always be local. I don't want to have to depend on an internet connection in order to access my own files. To enable syncing of your desktop and documents, start by opening System Settings, select your Apple ID at the top, select iCloud, then iCloud Drive. In the window that pops up, turn on the toggles for both Sync This Back and Desktop and Documents folders. Now, in order to make sure your files are always stored locally, if you want to be like me, back on the iCloud page, you'll see a toggle for Optimized Mac Storage. This will be toggled on by default, but if you have enough local storage, you might want to toggle that off. Now, let's switch gears to mail. Setting up mail the way you like it is a very personal thing, so I'm definitely not going to tell you what you need to do, but I will tell you what I like to do. I have several email addresses, but I like my default emails to come from allison@podfeed.com. When you first set up a new Mac, Apple tells you that it knows best. If you open up Mail, Settings, and select the Composing tab, you'll see that it will automatically send, quote, from best account, unquote. No idea how it decides what is the best account, but I can tell you for me, it's almost always wrong. I change mine to my professional email address, and if I'm writing to my friends or family, I can always change it on the fly to my personal address. I found that this setting is not particularly sticky, though. It seems to degrade over time on all of my different devices, so it's a good idea to keep an eye on that address from which mail is sending. Now, I don't think I'm alone in being kind of fussy about what fonts I use when viewing and creating content. In Apple Mail on the Font and Colors tab, within Settings, you can change the message list font and the message font, and you can set a fixed width font. I'm not particular about the colors for indented quoted text, but if that blows your dress up, you can change that as well. I've become fond of the Roboto Light font, which I downloaded from Google Fonts years ago, and Courier is my go to for a fixed width font. Even if you're not fussy about your fonts, you might want to change the size of the fonts for the message list and for your messages. Perhaps you're a youngster and you'd like to pack in more information on the screen. You can set them to be smaller than the defaults. If you're a wee bit older, you might want to increase the size. All of this is available in the Fonts and Colors tab in Mail Settings. I find it amusing that when we continue to use terms and iconography that used to have physical meaning and yet no longer do. A perfect example is that every save icon is a picture of a floppy disk, and I would bet most younger folks have never seen one. Another great example is the term CC and BCC in an email. Even if you're of the younger set, you may know that it stands for carbon copy and blind carbon copy, but like the floppy disk, you may not know the origin story. Back in my day, before computers came on the scene for typing, if we wanted a copy of something being typed, we had to put a piece of carbon paper between two pieces of paper. When you typed on the top sheet, it would imprint on the carbon and transfer the letters to the sheet underneath. By the way, I looked on Amazon and you can buy carbon paper today. It's kind of funny that that still exists, like lots and lots of hits. I might buy some just to play with it. Anyway, when you wrote a letter to someone, it was considered good form to type CC followed by the name of anyone who received a carbon copy of the letter you were sending. But if you didn't want the recipient to know that you were sending a copy to someone else, that was called a blind carbon copy. Now, in Apple Mail, by default, you can see the to field and you can see the carbon copy field, but you don't see the blind carbon copy field. If you want to send an email to, say, a large group of people, it's considered good form to hide their email addresses from each other, and the blind carbon copy field is where you do that. In order to be able to send blind carbon copies, go to the View menu in Mail and select BCC address field. If you only want to see the BCC address field occasionally and you're a keyboard shortcut junkie, you can use Option Command B to toggle it on and off. Now, since Apple first introduced its Mail app, the most recent messages have always been at the top. I wish I knew why, but the default is now to show new messages at the bottom. If you open Mail Settings and select the Viewing tab, you'll find a nice little checkbox that says Show Most Recent Messages at the top, as it should be. I also checked the box right next to it that says Mark all messages as read when opening a conversation. Drives me bananas when I see that blue dot next to a long message thread and I have to scroll through all of the messages trying to figure out which one is unread. Now, here's a bonus tiny tip that I learned from the Mac Geek Gab. If you select a single message within a thread and hold down Command Shift U, it will toggle that one message unread and read. If you apply Command Shift U to a thread where every message has been read, it gets a little weird. It only toggles some of the messages as unread. But if any of the messages in the thread are marked as unread, it will mark them all as read with just that key combo. No more scrolling to find the blue dot. I plan on using this often because I like to leave the very last message in a thread as unread to remind me how to respond. So, not how to respond, to respond. Oh, I actually was thinking about mimeographs right when I wrote that up. Everybody who's old enough knows that, right? I plan on using this often because I like to leave just the very last message in a thread unread to remind me to respond to it. And it makes me crazy if the whole thing is unread. So, like, let's say there's 8, I'll be thinking, oh no, I have 8 unread emails, but it isn't true. It's only one that I really want to get back to. So, I'm going to use this control to quickly see and give that one blue dot. I was the class secretary for my history class, and I got to make the mimeographs. Oh, I wonder whether that stuff was toxic. All right. Probably the most irritating thing about a fresh install of macOS is when you open an audio file and it imports the audio file into Apple Music. I literally have never wanted that to be the option. I also never remember to fix this until the first time it happens on a clean install. The trick to fix it is to select an audio file in the Finder, such as, say, an MP3. And then in the Finder menu bar, choose File, Get Info, or simply hold down Command I to bring up the Get Info window. This will give you a lot of fun information about the file. Partway down, you should see something that says Open With. It may have a chevron pointing to the right, which indicates it can be opened. Within there will be a drop-down menu, which is most likely set to Apple Music. I change audio files to open in QuickTime. Below that, you will see it says Change All. When selected, you'll be asked to confirm that you want to make such a drastic, scary change, but just say yes. Once you've done this for MP3 files, you have to rinse and repeat for WAV files, AIFF files, and M4A files, pretty much all your audio file formats. It's a bit of a hassle to do the first time, but it's a lot harder to accidentally open files in Apple Music and then have to go get rid of all those files that are cluttering up your music library. By the way, you can change what applications open your files of any type, not just audio files. For example, I set PNG files to open in Shutter so I can easily annotate them or pin them to the screen. I set SVG files to open in Affinity Designer and DocX files to open in Apple Pages. You hated Mimios, huh? Oh, carbon tetrachloride. That doesn't sound good, Kevin. All right. Good. Wait. What just happened? Files to open in Apple Pages. Probably the most irritating thing about a fresh install of macOS is... What did I just do? I think I just duplicated the section and give that one blue dot. Probably the most... I did. I don't even know how I did that. Oh, well. Some keystroke duplicates. Almost had the same thing on there twice.
Do you want to verify the end of that just to make sure that's what you think it is?
Yeah, it's not the worst idea. X files to open in Apple Pages. Yeah, that is where I thought it would be. Yeah, it said Speak 23, and the other one was Speak 23, so that's where I got my hint. Yeah. All right, we're powering through here. All right, it's time to go on Safari. Years ago, Apple made a very silly decision. All right, let's go on Safari now. Years ago, Apple made a very silly decision for one setting in Safari. If you look at the General tab at the bottom, you'll see a checkbox that says, and I quote, "Open safe files after downloading. Save files include movies, pictures, sounds, text, documents, and archives. This box is checked on by default. I suppose it might be pleasing to have files open automatically after you download them, but how does Apple know that these files are safe? I mean, especially archives. They could contain just about anything, including executable files. I recommend giving yourself the opportunity to make sure that you were the one who downloaded a file before deciding to open it automatically. I uncheck this box the first time I open Safari. I see a typo. Go on Safari. Quote. And then I put it in quotes. All right. I have a couple Safari extensions that I really like. If you open up Safari settings and select the extensions tab, you can add new extensions. One Password for Safari is a fan favorite that gets installed first thing. I like to use Grammarly to check my spelling, grammar, and punctuation in all applications on my Mac, and I also install the Grammarly for Safari extension. Anytime I'm typing in a web form, Grammarly helps me keep from appearing uneducated. Now, last year, I told you about a terrific Safari extension called Keyword Search, and if anything, I am a bigger fan today than ever before. In a nutshell, Keyword Search allows me to type just a couple of letters into the search bar of my Safari windows to tell it which website I want to search. For example, um, let's see, what is not safe? Yep. Let me see one thing here. Did I think too big again? Automatically. I unchecked this box the first time I opened Safari. Yeah, I thought that was too big. Nope. In Safari. I have a couple Safari extensions that I need showing security now. Yeah. For example, to search my own site, I only type SP before my search term for search pod feed. I use GI to do a Google image search, SEO to search screencasts online, and SPBS to search the Programming by Stealth show notes. I would feel like I have my hands tied around my back now without the keyword search Safari extension. I also have an extension called Open Access Helper, written by NosillaCast Klaus Wolf. I don't often need to use it myself, but it's an extension that helps you find open versions of research papers that might be under a paywall on your first search. Now, it's not bypassing any copy protection, it's just searching in other legitimate resources where information is more freely distributed. Since I don't do this kind of research, I keep it on my Mac just the few times I need it, but I don't enable it until I need it. If you do, it might be a great extension for you. Now, I got a little nerd alert here. If you're a developer or if you occasionally want to see what's under the hood on a web page, there's a secret menu you can enable in Safari. In the Advanced tab of Safari settings at the very bottom, you'll see a checkbox labeled Show Features for Web Developers. This will enable a new menu from the Safari menu bar entitled Developer. And my favorite tool in this menu, when I'm not doing the console play to, oh, come on, my favorite. And my favorite, what was play? And my favorite tool in this menu, when I'm not using the console to play with JavaScript, is the Show Web Inspector option. If you select the little crosshairs in the tools that pop up from the bottom, you can drag your cursor around the web page and it'll show you the HTML code for what you've selected. Now, this sounds super nerdy, and it kind of is, but there's a relatively unnerdy thing I use it for. When I want to tell you about a video tutorial I've created for Screencasts Online, for example, the one I just did and just talked about Google Forms, I log out of the SCO website so I can't see any of the paid for content. Then I use their search for my latest tutorial. In the Web Inspector, I can use the crosshairs tool to select the free preview version of my video. At the bottom of the Safari window, I can see the URL for this free preview. I copy that URL and I post it into a blog post of my own where I can promote the tutorial. Okay, maybe that is pretty nerdy, but it's might be just the right amount of nerdy for you. All right, let's talk about some more global systems. I'd like to go through a few of the system settings I change at the Finder level. I am very impatient. So, one of the first things I do is speed up how quickly a key repeats if I hold it down. In system settings, scroll all the way down nearly to the bottom where you'll see keyboard. At the very top of the menu that opens, I take that key repeat slider and I drag it all the way to the fastest settings. I don't remember what the default is for delay until repeat, but I drag that slider until it's the second shortest option. Now, this is a perfect example of my preferences that might be very likely different from yours. Maybe when you open up a new Mac, the key repeat is way too fast for you. Either way, it's good to know where you can control this. Now, I don't know why, but I really dislike clicking on a trackpad. I much prefer. All right. Oh, that's interesting, Mike. Now, I don't know why, but I really dislike clicking. Eh, Yeah, there's a lot of good uses for it. Comes up. Now, I don't know why, it's like a psychological problem, but I really dislike clicking on a trackpad. I much prefer to simply tap the trackpad rather than having to press hard to click. There are two settings to control this that I like to change, and for no reason other than Apple likes to make settings kind of a fun scavenger hunt. They're in two very different places. To simply enable tap to click on your trackpad, in system settings, right below the keyboard settings that we just changed, you'll see trackpad. At the bottom of that menu, you'll see a toggle to tap to click. Now, even if you're okay with true clicking, pressing hard on your trackpad, it's nice to have that feature enabled for when you like to use a lighter touch. Now, the other time I normally have to click instead of tap is when I want to drag a window or a file around on screen. You can enable a feature that allows you to gently place three fingers on your trackpad while at the top of a window or on a file and drag without ever clicking. This feature is called three finger drag, and boy, howdy, is it buried. It used to be in the trackpad settings, which made perfect sense, but no longer is it easy to find. In system settings, guess what? Open accessibility, select pointer control. On that page, you'll see a button to change trackpad options. Finally, one of the options that will be revealed is dragging style, and it'll have a drop down where you can select three finger drag. Now, it is upsetting to me that they didn't hyphen three finger, but you'll get over that transgression the first time you use three fingers to drag a window or a file. Now, I had cataract surgery a few years ago, and I now have the best vision of my life, but I still run into situations where something's printed too small on a website for me to be able to read. My favorite example of things that are printed too small is street names in mapping apps. You can zoom in, but when you go to try to read them, the cities and streets get bigger, but the street names shrink back to the same size. The solution is to enable using a gesture with scrolling to temporarily scroll in on, nope, not scroll, zoom. The solution is to enable using a gesture with scrolling to temporarily zoom in on your screen. Open our good old friend System Settings again and go to our favorite tab, Accessibility, and select Zoom. Look for a toggle to enable Use Scroll Gesture with modifier keys to zoom. And below, you'll see the option to choose a modifier key for the scroll gesture. I just use the default control key. Once this feature is enabled, you can hold down the control key and scroll up on your trackpad or mouse. The entire screen will zoom in right where your cursor is so you can read that darn street name. Once you've successfully read the absurdly tiny text, simply hold down the control key again and scroll back down, and everything will go back to normal. I really like this feature because it simply never gets in your way, but it's right there at your fingertips when you need it. Well, I've now talked about most, if not all, of these settings in the past over the years, but I really wanted to collect them all in one place where you could see the kind of settings that might make your Mac life more efficient after a clean install or after getting a new Mac. Whew, 42
That was
minutes without that 12-minute extra article.
wow. And that's your last?
That is my last.
Well done.
It's
At
good.
6:04, we're a little late. But
Oh, we are. Oh, okay. Let me wind it up. While I do this, while I close this out, you do a chapter count.
Okay.
All right, here we go. Well, that is going to wind us up for this week. Did you know you can email me at allison@podfeet.com anytime you like? If you have a question or a suggestion, just send it on over. I love to help people. You can follow me on Mastodon at podfeet at chaos.social. Remember, everything good starts with podfeet.com. If you want to join the conversation, you can join our Slack community like Stephen Ramirez did over at podfeet.com/Slack, where you can talk to me and all of the other lovely Nosilla castaways. You can support the show like Tom did, double the pleasure at podfeet.com/Patreon or with a one-time donation at podfeet.com/PayPal. And if you want to join in the fun of the live show, head on over to podfeet.com/live on Sunday nights at 5 p.m. Pacific time and join the friendly and enthusiastic Nosilla castaways. Thanks for listening and stay subscribed.
So I count 8 chapters.
Eight.
That's probably the biggest you've done in terms of chapters.
Wow. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Let me check again.
Google Forms.
Mm-hmm.
Find My. Tiny Tip, the easy way to bring in Windows.
Mm-hmm.
Star Trails.
Mm-hmm.
Tiny Tip.
Mm-hmm.
Support the show. Mac OS settings.
You haven't done Eufy.
Right. Remember I told you I was going to hold you.
Oh, okay. 7.
There it is. All right. Let me throw
I eventually
outro
got
music
there.
in. There you go. Well, but it's good. I need to
Remember
sure
to put it back in
extra,
next week.
Well, I got to make sure I take it out.
Yeah.
Too. All right. Let me get the music set, and then we'll be able to export. We'll be able to go sing and stay subscribed. There it goes. All right. We have our chapter marks. We have an exported show. I have to kiss Rose goodbye. Goodbye, Rose. Goodbye, everybody.
Good
Sorry
night.
for the creaky voice. Oh, I didn't tell you guys. Guess who's coming to see us on Tuesday? Helma from the Netherlands is coming to our house.
Helma! Now, she won't be here for the live show next Sunday, right?
No. I think I'm going to make her do a recording with me about something.
But we will be here for next week.
Here.
Very good.
Oh, you learned 5 new things. Cool, Mike. All right, everybody. We'll see you.
Good night, everyone. All right.